Buddhaya. Good evening. Welcome to the Buddha Dharma TV. I am Karen Tan. Today we start our program with the chanting for blessing. We are going to listen to the chanting of the second part of Jaya Mingala Gata, stanzas of joyous victory. It is conducted by Venerable Dempatawa Upalawana of Sri Lanka. To attain the desired calmness, please listen to the chanting mindfully, calmly, and peacefully.
Ukkitta khagga matihattha sudaru nantang dhavantiyo janapatang gulimala vantang idhibhi sankhatamano jitava munindo tang tejasa bhavatu te jaya mangalani Khatwana Khattha Mudarang Iva Gabhi Niya Cinchaya Duttha Vachanang Janakaya Majje Santena Soma Vidhina Jitava Munindo Tang Tejasa Bhavatu te Jaya Mangalani Satchang Vibhaya Mati Sat Chakavada Ketung Vadabhiro Pitamanang Ati Andha Bhutang Panyapadipa Jalito Jitava Munindo Tante Jasa Bhavatu te Jaya Mangalani
us focus our attention of Venerable Ajahn Achalo as he presents the insightful sermon on auspicious sign, good karma, lead us along the path. Prepare yourselves for a deep dive into his wisdom and guidance. His words promise to enrich our understanding and inspire us to reflect on our actions. Please welcome Ajahn Achalo of Australia to deliver his sermon.
And just actually want to express my happiness to be here. I'm very happy to be in Melbourne. I'm very happy to have had the opportunity to encourage people and share to the extent that I can some of the things that my teachers have tried to teach me. Some of you may have been here, must be 15 years ago now, on Ajahn Anand's first trip to Australia. And that was the first time I came to Melbourne, was attending to Ajahn Anand. We came from Thailand. And I remember that Ajahn Anand was sitting here and I was sitting down there, one of 5 monks. I also spent some time with Ajahn Kalyano a few years ago, so I know a good number of you who were making offerings at that monastery as well, so I think there's some possibly some karmic connection with the Buddhists of Melbourne, and I'm very happy to come and encourage and share, see my old friends. Mostly this last week I was trying to point to methods in meditation, how to recognize mindful awareness, and how to, in a way, distill or refine that awareness by training with skillful meditation objects. And when we do this, the things which cloud the mind, the hindrances, various types of delusion naturally drop away. So just trying to point to that, mostly through methods, coming back to the breath, dropping the past, not picking up the future, and also using metta and the practices of forgiveness as a way to clear out some of the negativities that can build up in the mind, and making the mind brighter and happier so that it's more happy to settle in the present moment. And then we've just been practicing together, staying in the present moment and just allowing things to drop away, the various things that we pick up, training in meditation to put down thoughts about the past, not pick up the future, not send the mind out to thoughts about others, and just stay within the body, allowing mindful awareness to become clear, bright, and then seeing things more in accordance with truth. And when we do that, as you've all had some experience, there's less suffering in the mind, and well-being is naturally there as a result. That's how the Four Noble Truths work. When we practice the path, we recognize that which causes suffering and we are able to let it go. So that's when we have Samma Sati, Samma Samadhi, right intention, and then we see the various things, the way we grasp, the things that we hold on, the way they cause stress and pain in the mind. And we get some practice at putting things down and then just resting in the mind's innate goodness. And we can see that it's not really a case that it's all just suffering and then at the end you're an arahant or a Buddha. If we practice correctly, in general, although the mind becomes more sensitive to this characteristic of suffering or unsatisfactoriness, if we're practicing correctly, we will have more and more space from that in the mind, because the mind that has mindfulness and concentration and right view, which begins to develop some insight, is able to separate from its mind objects, from feelings. You're able to see feelings as feelings. You're able to see thoughts as thoughts. And painful feelings are still painful feelings, but when we can separate in the mind, pull back from these things, not identify with them as being a self, and not grasp in the same way, there's actually much less suffering. So in this path, it's a gradual training, but in general, well-being, contentment, peace deepen. So that's the good news. This does require a commitment to the practice. It does require practicing consistently, and I think this is the most difficult challenge that we all have, monks included. Understanding the method isn't that difficult. What is difficult is doing it every single day. But this is necessary, because mindfulness as a quality, if we neglect it, if we neglect cultivating it or strengthening it, training it, it weakens, it gets fuzzy. And then when we come back to the practice is difficult. There's lots of thoughts and lots of dullness, lots of agitation. So we really do have to stick with our practices and be consistent, because what happens is if you are, you'll find that your mindfulness develops some strength and some integrity, and the practice doesn't seem so difficult. But if we do stop and start, it all seems very difficult. So as a gift to yourself, you really need to try to be consistent, try to do your practice every single day. And I recommend doing it in the morning, because many people think they're going to meditate in the evening, but they find they've had a busy day and they come to meditate and they're tired and they fall asleep. So if you can begin the day, even if it's just 15 minutes or half an hour, if you begin the day by recollecting the Buddha and his teachings, 1, you'll live a more skillful life, but 2, you'll remember the practice and you'll remember to practice. Being able to focus in that way, you'll probably make decisions which help you to find more time to practice. And if you've established the habit of practicing every single day, 15 minutes or half an hour, when you see the benefit of that and you have that habit, it's not so difficult to extend it. You might find that after 15 minutes you just want to sit another 15 minutes. Or you might find that after half an hour you want to sit another 15 minutes. That's when we begin to experience the benefit of that sense of clarity and peace, not being so identified with everything, then you just want to stay with that. If we do it in the mornings, we can bring some of that quality into our life. It makes us less reactive, it gives us choice. Sometimes we're about to have a reaction and we can tell ourselves, don't do that, don't say that. Or sometimes we might be in the middle of a reaction and we can say to ourselves, stop. But if we don't practice, if we don't generate that clarity, you'll find that the thoughts and the feelings swell up in the mind and we tend to grasp them and they tend to take us on a bit of a trip. And it's afterwards that we think, oh, I wish I hadn't done that, I wish I hadn't said that. So if you care for yourself, and I hope you do, try to take care of your mind. We all take very good care of our bodies. We take care of our superannuation funds. We take care of our cars, our life insurance policies. Take care of your smartphone. So the mind, which the Buddha says in the Dhammapada is the forerunner, all good things have to flow from your mind. And I'm going to give a few examples, a few anecdotes, personal stories a bit later, which point to this law of karma. We really need to, once again, if we care for ourselves, we really need to be careful of the kind of karma that we make. And we need to recognize the opportunities that we have to make good karma, so that we utilize those opportunities, because good karma ripens as good opportunities, supportive circumstances, and whenever we have obstructions and difficulties, if we've made enough good karma, we find people help us through that. So good karma is a wonderful thing, and it's really good to embrace all of the practices which generate good karma. That's an investment in this life, later in this life, and also in your next lives. So as I said, mostly I talked about the methods, and mostly I led people in the methods, but today I'm going to tell a few stories. So this is a little bit more anecdotal, possibly a little more speculative, but what I'm hoping is after contemplating these more personal anecdotes, then I want to try to point to the law of karma and the existence of heaven realms or other worlds, parallel realities, and just as a pointer to remind us to be careful of the kind of karma that we make and diligent in making good karma. And so I'm just going to tell a few stories, and I hope they're relevant. When I was 20, living in Sydney, I was working in Glebe, I was working in a vegan cafe, and I was working with the beautiful people, the new agey types, the ones that do yoga and study massage, and I was pretty miserable actually. And something that was really painful for me was I had this nice looking body because I used to swim 2 kilometers 3 times a week, and I used to do boxing training. The reason I did boxing training wasn't because I wanted to hit anybody, I just didn't want any fat on my body. And so that was a way to get very aerobically fit. And a lot of the customers that used to come to this vegan restaurant, they used to think that I was a very happy person. And I found that very painful because I knew I wasn't. So I remember being very depressed when I was in my studio apartment in Marrickville, and I'd ride my mountain bike to work in Glebe. And you'd hug everybody and smile at everybody. And that's the practice of metta, isn't it? Being kind and being friendly. But actually on the inside I was quite miserable. And it was very painful that people thought I was a happy person, but I didn't want to share my misery with people. Here's your veggie burger. How are you? I'm very depressed. I want to kill myself. So, you smile and you say, I'm okay. And you go home and you feel depressed. So I had this feeling since I was 15 actually, not to go to university. I had this strong sense, don't go. And my mum and my dad were asking, what are you going to do? And I said, I don't know. And my dad wanted me to be a doctor and my mum wanted me to be a lawyer. And and I was thinking, well, maybe. But the day came when it was time to apply for university. And I did apply for university and I was accepted. I applied for a Bachelor of Behavioural Sciences and I was accepted. And my mum said, okay, so you're going to do that. You're going to be a psychologist. And I'm like, yes, but I'm deferring for a year. So I deferred for that year and I just had this really strong sense, don't do it. But I didn't know what I was going to do. And so I moved to Sydney and I thought, well, I'll study acting, study singing, and I studied a bit of massage. But I still didn't know what I was going to do. None of those things seemed like something that I could commit to. And I remember that my sister at that time, she was a journalist for a current affairs program. She's quite a cynical person. And she told me that I was the most irreverent person that she knew. Because I just, at that time in my life, didn't have something to revere. I didn't, and so I was quite cynical in my speech and sarcastic in my speech, and she actually enjoyed my company in those days. Since I became a monk, she doesn't like me as much. But anyway, what was interesting was the reason I was irreverent was that I had not yet found that I could truly revere. But I remember one night coming out of the vegan cafe, must have been at about 11 o'clock at night, and I was alone. I was coming onto Glebe Point Road, and I looked to the sky, and in the ideal picture there'd be lots of stars, but it's Sydney, so there weren't any stars. I was looking into the brown haze, but I was looking heavenward, and I said, I accept it, I admit it. I don't know how to be happy, and I don't know what to do with my life. And that was after a couple of years of trying the massage, the acting, the singing, the swimming, the sensuality, the movies, the sex, the beach, and kind of like none of this is working. But I made a vow, and I think this must come from past life, because, why is this? I didn't go to church and I wasn't allowed to go to religious education. So I don't know where this came from, but anyway, I looked to this sky and I said, if you give me a sign, because I had some kind of intuitive faith in angels. I didn't believe in an all-powerful God and I wasn't sure about hell yet, but I did have some kind of sense for heavenly beings. I had a sense that there were benevolent beings that cared for us. And so I looked to the skies and I said, if you send me a sign, I vow that I will follow. And so some very interesting things started to happen. And I think in part because, one, I was desperate, and that desperation elicited a particular kind of sincerity, so I meant it. And so I came back to work a couple of days later, and somebody forgot their Lonely Planet guide to Thailand, and they left it on the bench. And so I took that Lonely Planet guide home and I was reading, and I discovered after reading that Thailand was 95% Buddhist. I hadn't known that. I didn't know that. And I had done a Goenka retreat, one of those Vipassana retreats, a year or so before. And since that time I had meditated every day. Mr. Goenkaji said that meditation is like anything, and if you want results from it, you have to train, just like athletes train, or just like artists practice their skills. If you want good results from meditation, you have to do it every day. So I did do that. And I think that might be another factor in why I do think some beings interceded to try to help me. I think the meditation, commitment to the meditation might have been a factor. So anyway, the owner of the book came back, wanted their book back, and I had to bring the book back, but I didn't notice that Thailand was a 95% Buddhist country, and that got me interested. At that time, at the age of 20, I hadn't been overseas yet, and I was thinking I should go overseas, it might be good to go overseas. Then a few days later something else happened. In those days we used to get paid in cash, in an envelope, once a week, and so I was opening my wallet on payday, and I was looking, and I saw this coin that I'd never seen before as I was putting my pay in the wallet. And I asked my friend, "What's this coin?" And she said, "Oh, that's a 5 baht. That's Thai money." And when she said that, my hairs went up on my arms, and I had some kind of a ooh feeling. And so I noticed that. So that was the second sign in 1 week. The following week, an interesting thing happened. I was the one that had to clean the fryer late at night. And the fryer was Italian or German, I think. And the food was Japanese inspired. But there was this pipe that you had to attach to the other pipe to let the oil out. It was kind of a round shape. And I'd been doing this for a year and I hadn't noticed something, but as I was putting this pipe on this other pipe to filter the oil and refill it with fresh oil, I noticed that this pipe had one word on it, and I'd never noticed it before, and that word was Thailand. It didn't even say made in Thailand. It just said Thailand, which is pretty weird actually. But I stood up and I said, "Okay, I'm going to Thailand." And I made a vow, within 10 weeks I will go to Thailand. And I did. Now, living in Sydney as a 20-year-old, it was very difficult to save money, especially on a waiter's wage. So I managed to save just enough money for the ticket, and it was 2 weeks, and I got my ticket, and I got my passport, and I got my visa, and I had no money. So I had to sell my bed, my bike, my computer, basically anything I could sell, I sold it to get some money. But I did go. Now an interesting thing happened, another interesting thing happened. This must have been 3 or 4 days before I left. A woman walked into the cafe, and I had a feeling like I should talk to her. And she was from Canada, and she was a backpacker, and she was travelling, and she just arrived in Australia, and she said, "Is there any work?" And I said, "Well, there might be, because I'm just about to leave." She said, "Where are you going?" I said, "Thailand." She said, "I just came from Thailand yesterday." She asked me, "Why are you going to Thailand?" And I said, "Well, I'm embarrassed to say, but this is what I said. I said, I hate winter, and I like the beach. It's coming up to winter, so I'm going to go to the beach." That's what I said first. The second thing I said was, "And I'm interested in Buddhist meditation." She said, "I've just come from an island where there's a Buddhist meditation center with a view of the ocean." And she wrote down the address. And so that was very helpful, because I went to that meditation center, and I ended up spending 5 out of 9 months there. And it was enormously helpful to be able to... The teachers were Westerner. Rosemary was Australian and Steve was American. They're teaching various meditation methods, Buddhist meditation methods on an island. They would teach 10-day retreats, and if you were an assistant there, you would help people settle in for their retreat and clean and wash sheets and that kind of thing. And then you would sit alternate retreats. So I was doing that. I was sitting retreat and then helping other people sit a retreat. Now, I look back on that and I recognize that I was incredibly fortunate, because if it was Australia, I think I would have found it very difficult to live in a meditation center where you had to keep the precepts and meditate twice a day. And I have to admit that it was in part the sunsets over the sea and the Thai curries and the Thai people and the exotic location that made it possible for me to stay there as long as I did. And it was very helpful because during that period of time, over that 9-month period, I realized that what I wanted to do this lifetime was focus on meditation. But I really needed that kind of container, that kind of opportunity to explore meditation in an ongoing way. And I remember when my visa was expired and I had to go to Malaysia, I think I mentioned this the other day, I would break a couple of the precepts because I wasn't sure yet about Sila. I wasn't completely convinced. I thought meditation was a very good thing, but I wasn't sure about those 5 rules. And so I'd go and break a couple, and I'd come back, and this was very helpful because I couldn't help but notice that before I went and broke the precepts, I was actually fine, I felt fine, and there was some energy and I felt a bit frustrated, and the mind was saying, if you just do this, that'll be fun. And then you go and you do it. It wasn't too bad, it was fairly moderate, but it was against the precepts. But anyway, I would go back and I would see that my mind was much happier before I did that. I was experiencing for myself, and I really had to somewhat begrudgingly admit that it really seems like Lord Buddha knows what he's talking about. That if you keep these precepts strictly for long enough, there's a well-being that blossoms in the mind. And when you break them, there's an increase in anxiety and neurotic thoughts, compulsive thoughts, obsessive thoughts, and basically you feel less happy. So once again, I'd stick around, do more meditation, and keep the precepts, and the visa would expire, and I'd go and I'd continue with my experiment. And by the end of the 9 months, I really saw meditation and keeping the precepts. I was the happiest I'd ever been. And so that was a very good thing to see. Part of the reason I tell that story is pointing to this law of karma. I believe that there must have been some good supports there from a previous life, which I'm very, very grateful for now. And so why is it that something's responding when I ask for help? And why is it that that woman walked into that vegan cafe on Glebe Point Road on that day and wrote down that address? Because this was before the time of the internet, there was no way I could search that. You needed to rely upon kind people giving you a pointer. So I look at that and I'm very grateful to that woman, I'm very grateful to Stephen Rosemary, and I'm very grateful to the good karma that helped me to get there. Similarly, when I was on that island, I met a man who'd just come from the International Forest Monastery in Ubon Ratchathani. I had no idea that such a place existed. So once again, I had to depend upon one kind person to tell me that there is a monastery in Thailand for English-speaking people, and you can go and train there. And so I went and I had a look. And I never had the thought that I could be a monk or that I would be a monk. But I started to have a feeling that I had no choice. And so I went there, and they had this gradual training. They had this situation where you could keep 8 precepts for 6 months, 10 precepts for a year, and then you decide whether you become a monk. So I went and I had to try. I just thought, okay, we'll try. And so I'm very grateful to that person as well, who gave me a pointer. But yet again, why is that occurring? It has to be occurring because of wholesome conditions laid in the past, that someone was able to come and tell me about that monastery. So I'm very grateful. This is 17 years, 18 years later. More recently, again, I just tell these stories hopefully to point to the law of karma. I was intending to go to India for a 6-month period. I think this is about 4 years ago, after spending some time in Ajahn Kalyanu's monastery in Bodhiwana. And I went to pay respects to a very senior monk. I think he was about 103 at that time, and reputed to be a bodhisattva practitioner, so a lot of samadhi and a lot of metta and psychic powers. So I was going to pay respects to him, and all I was doing really was asking for his blessing for that long period in India. So as I was paying respects to him, I said, I'm going to India, and if possible, if you could please spread blessings and keep me in mind, I'd be very grateful. And he looked at me and he said, in 5 months your monastery will be ready. Now, what was very interesting about that statement was that I hadn't mentioned any monasteries and I hadn't asked any questions. So I thought, oh. And I had assumed that it would probably be in Australia, interestingly enough. So anyway, I went to India, and I ended up coming back. I didn't spend 6 months, I spent 2 months, and then a couple of months back in Thailand, and then another 2 months. But in those couple of months back in Thailand, someone who had practiced with me 5 years ago at Wat Nanachat's branch monastery on the border of Laos came and said to me, I have a friend who owns a resort in Phetchabun province. He has a piece of land which is ideal for meditation, and he doesn't use it enough, and he feels it's a shame. And he's asked me to find a monk that might be able to develop that place so that people can benefit from it. Now, what was interesting about this was it was exactly 5 months since the venerable monk mentioned this. So I thought, okay, well, I better have a look. And I discussed it with Ajahn, and Ajahn said, go and have a look, Ajahn. So I went and I had a look, and something interesting occurred, because once again I had never even thought to be an abbot in Thailand. Honestly, never once, as a long-term proposition. But when I was on this land, I had a feeling in my bones, a feeling of kind of, this is the place. I might die here. So that was very interesting. So again, this points to a few things. It points to not self. Life often doesn't go how we plan it. But it also points to karma, things ripening due to things done in the past. And so I was assuming that that very senior monk had a perspective that I didn't, and he could see that something was about to ripen. And I'd also discussed, interestingly enough, just a couple of weeks before the man offered the land, I discussed with Ajahn what he thought I should do with my future, and he had said, you should be an abbot and you should do it in Thailand. So he'd said that 2 weeks before, and this Bodhisattva monk, Lumpok Klian, had said 5 months before, the monastery's coming. And that gave me the courage, in a way, to commit to the place, because there was no water, a very rutted road, and I didn't know anybody there. So I knew it was going to be difficult. But we received a phenomenal amount of support very quickly, and now I have 6 kutis. We had 7 monks there just 2 months ago. We've built 6 kutis, we have 2 meditation halls, we have a meditation platform, we even have a stupa from Nepal. We have electricity, we have water. So a lot of support came very quickly. And but it's just pointing, isn't it? It's pointing to karma, and it's also pointing to not self. It wasn't something that I'd planned. It wasn't the way I'd planned it. Even once I'd accepted it, I expected that I'd be living with 1 or 2 monks, maybe 3. And within 2 years, it was 7 monks. So again, it's not really up to me. You just have to work with conditions as best as you can, and then things turn out differently. I'm going to talk about another experience in India. When I was in that 2-month period, I'd spent some time in Ladakh, and then I spent some time in Savatthi. Something interesting happened in Ladakh, and something interesting happened in Savatthi. When I'd gone to Nepal on pilgrimage, I think it was 8 years ago, we'd spent one night in a very nice hotel in Buddha, in the Kathmandu Valley. It was the Hyatt. And there's beautiful stupas in the lobby, carved from stone, very traditional, beautifully carved stone stupas. And I remember feeling that they were very beautiful because they were small and elegant, but full of sacred symbols and potent meaning, symbolically beautiful, but elegant, not too big, not covered with gold leaf, and I really liked them. I remember thinking it was a real shame that they were in a hotel lobby and nobody was relating to them in a way which inspired wholesome mind states. But so there we were in Ladakh, and we were going to a lake, a Himalayan lake, to do some meditation. My attendant and I, we stopped at this town literally in the middle of nowhere called Chumatang, which is a town before you turn off to the lake. And one man, an American man, was walking back from that lake, and he spent one night there and we spent one night there. As it turned out, he studied sculpture with the man who made those stupas in Nepal. and he spoke fluent Nepali. So, because where I live was actually a place where there was a lot of guerrilla warfare for 10 years, so it was a communist insurgency, and the scariest communists fled to that part of Thailand because there's a lot of valleys and a lot of jungle. And so I did feel on some nights that there were some creepy energies around, probably a lot of ghosts. I'd felt that it would be good to do something to brighten up the psychosphere a little bit. So I thought maybe I should make a little stupa. And so it was just fascinating that stupa that I'd seen 6 years ago, which I really loved, seemingly by coincidence I met the student of the sculptor who spoke Nepali, and I was able to liaise with him. So it's been a great joy to be involved in that project, and we were able within the first year to build a stupa and put relics in it, Buddha relics of Arahants, in the very center of the monastery on the highest piece of land, with that American man's help. But once again, a story that points to karma and not self. It wasn't something that I arranged, it wasn't something that I planned, it was something that just happened. But it must have supportive conditions. And we all love the stupa. It's what we circumambulate on Magha Puja, Visakha Puja, Asala Puja. And it's at the highest point in the monastery. And for me, it helped me feel that the monastery was a monastery. It's a sacred space, a place of spiritual practice, has this beautiful symbol of the Buddha's enlightenment in its center. And it was an auspicious thing. Another thing that occurred was when we were in Savatthi, the day came to go back to Thailand, and my friend, Francois, Frenchman, told me the morning that we were leaving, he said, Ajahn Acho, we need to leave 4 hours early. And I'm like, what? He said, yeah, I have this really strong feeling in my meditation that we need to leave 4 hours early today. And I remember thinking, I'm not sure if I want to leave 4 hours early. I don't want to wait 4 hours in an Indian airport. But I listened to him. He was very speaking sincerely, and he was adamant. And I thought, okay, well, can't hurt. Something very interesting happened. On the way to the airport, we had a flat tire 3 times. And we got to the airport half an hour late, even with our 4 hours extra. Fortunately, the plane was 1 hour late, as is often the case in India. But isn't that interesting? So why did he have that feeling in meditation? What was that? I didn't. I was meditating too, I felt fine. But he told me at breakfast, Ajahn, we need to leave 4 hours early. So I listened, and he was right. Actually, we should have left 4.5 hours early. But how unlikely is it that you would get 3 flat tires on one 300-kilometer journey? We came up with a theory that the boys that repair the tires are throwing tacks on the road because half a kilometre down the road there's this tire repair place by the side of the road, so I suspect that there's something going on there. But I'm very happy that my friend had his intuition and that we did get to the airport on time. Another story, this one's about a little boy, a good friend of mine, who died. I met him in America. He was Thai. His name was Todd. He had a condition called thalassemia, which is there's a problem with the bone marrow. Bone marrow doesn't make all of the things that bone marrow is supposed to make properly, so there's a problem with the blood cells. And the doctors suggested to him, well, they'd said that it was possible. With this condition, you have to take the iron out of, need blood transfusions, and you need to take the iron out of the blood. But people with this condition tend to have their lives shortened. They don't live to a ripe old age. So there is a procedure where you have your bone marrow extracted completely, and you have the bone marrow of a donor put in. And there's an 80% success rate, but a 20% fatality rate. And so this young boy, I think he was 10 or 11, he visited many monks, including me, and he paid respects to those monks, and he was given the decision, and he knew the possibilities. He was asked to make the decision himself. Did he want to continue with the blood transfusions and taking out the iron and all of the needles and live to maybe 40 or 50, or did he want to have the bone marrow transplant with the possibility of a long life with good health, no more needles, but a 20% chance of fatality? And he said, I want to have the transplant. So he had the transplant. And before he had the transplant, he became a novice monk at our branch monastery in California. And Todd was a very sweet boy. He was very naturally generous. Everybody liked him. He was a little bit hyperactive, his teachers said, but I felt it was more that he just had more energy than most people. He had a lot of accumulated virtue from past lives. That was my sense. He was very radiant, very humorous, and naturally good-hearted little boy. Everybody loved him, except his teachers. And so he had the bone marrow extraction, and he had the transplant, and basically it didn't take. And his immune system attacked the new bone marrow, and he had to have what was basically a slow and painful death, which is a horrible story. But the night, or a couple of nights before he lost consciousness, he had a dream. And he saw Lompo Pat, who is a wonderful, very gifted senior monk in Thailand, also reputed to be Bodhisattva practitioner, lots of samadhi, many lives of practice behind him. He came, and then Ajahn Pasano was there, Ajahn Anan was there, my teacher, I was there, and every monk that Todd had ever paid respects to came to him in his dream and chanted the paritas for him. And he woke up in the morning, get emotional thinking about it, my friend. He woke up in the morning and he told his mum, Mum, last night I dreamt of every monk I ever met came and chanted the paritas for me. And his mum said, that's really wonderful, Todd. And so, not long after he died, I asked Lompo Pat, who has gifts in Thailand, what happened to that little boy, and he said that he was reborn as a little angel, and not in one of the highest heavens, but in a heaven quite close to the human realm. And he said that he still visits the monasteries and the monks that he knew, and that basically he's fine. But I just ask you to consider what was occurring in Todd's mind. What is that? Because obviously the monks didn't really go and chant the paritas, but the monks were spreading loving kindness, they were dedicating merit, they were chanting for him. And what I think was occurring is just the sensitivity of Todd's mind. He was a good person, he'd been a novice, he had some good karma, he had faith, and so his mind was receptive to perceiving those blessings somehow. And so how he perceived it was as all of the monks that he'd ever met and paid respects coming and chanting for him. And so it's just an interest. I like to offer it out there as an example of the ways that merit and the ways that faith can support us. Again, I'm aware that it is speculative, but at the same time, it was enormously helpful for that little boy to have that dream the night before he died, or a couple of days before he died. And I'm pretty sure that in that hospital, which had hundreds of patients, many of them dying, that he was the only one that dreamt of all these monks coming and chanting him and blessing him. So, you know, it's just one of the ways I think that the faith faculty can support us, and that the merit that we make can also support us. There was another man I was visiting, Janaki's father, in hospital, and he was dying, and he was having visions of dark beings around him, and he was feeling quite scared. And I told him, you should recollect the good karma that you've made, and you should do the chanting that you've done, and I did some chanting for him. While I was chanting, he saw light come, and he felt better, and he never saw those dark images again. He never saw those dark beings again. And so again, it's just an example of making merit, recollecting the merit, and then recollecting the Buddha, and it has a brightening effect on the mind, an encouraging effect on the mind. And he also, as I heard, died quite peacefully. Another story about karma. I met a boy recently, 14-year-old boy in Bodh Gaya. When you go to Bodh Gaya, when you walk from your monastery or guest house or hotel to the temple grounds, you have to pass a rich mix of samsaric phenomena. And it's pretty amazing, actually. In just a couple of 100 meters, there are lepers, there are polio victims, there are homeless people, alcoholics, drug addicts, flower sellers, CD sellers, and I've gone many times and I feel like I know them all. I feel like they're part of my family. The first time I went to India, when I came back to Thailand, I was depressed for 2 months. But I've gone many times now, and I've practiced so much loving kindness and loving acceptance of these people just as they are, that now I see them and I feel like they're my friends, and just working through their karma. And there was one boy who struck me as being particularly intelligent, and he came and he was trying to sell me CDs, and I said, well, I already have some. And he says, well, what about your friends? And I said, well, my friends have some too. And he says, well, you know, how am I supposed to make a living? And I'm like, well, why aren't you in school? So I was stupid enough to ask a question. And he said, well, my father was an alcoholic, and we didn't have enough money to go to school, and so I left home at the age of 11. He said, I sell these CDs, and when I have enough money, I go home and I give money to my mum so she can put my brothers through school. And me being a big softie, I'm like, oh, ouch. Then I said, well, how's your dad now? And he said, well, I put him through detox, and he doesn't drink anymore. And he's gone back to riding rickshaws, driving rickshaws, but he doesn't quite get enough money, so I still working to make the money to help my mum and to help my brothers. So I was very touched by this, and because I was there for 6 weeks recently, he would approach me as I was walking to the temple and approach me as I was walking back from the temple, and I got to know him quite well. Eventually, the other monk I was with and the lay steward that I was with decided to help him out a bit. We gave some of our fund to help his parents and to help his brothers and to get him some new clothes, that kind of thing. But he has a very difficult life. Can you imagine leaving home at 11 with an alcoholic father and going to live somewhere where you don't know anybody and selling CDs to tourists? And I asked him, I said, do you have a dream? Do you have a vision? If I was to try to help you in some way, what could I do that would help you in this lifetime? And he said to me words I'll never forget. He said, I have no plan, I have no dream, I just want to leave this place. So, a very difficult life. And for us who go as pilgrims, Bodh Gaya is like the best place in the world. It's a wonderful place. You go with faith, and you go with health, and you have a safe place to live, and you go and you meditate, and you experience rapture, you recollect the Buddha, you feel grateful. But if you have to live there, among the lepers, the beggars, the drug addicts, and the mafia, it's a very difficult life. So it was really striking, and there's just this sense of, how did this kid land here? And you can look at these beings, and they can seem... One of the things I used to do in the beginning was I would kid myself, they're not really humans, just think of them as ghosts. Dedicate merit to them, don't try to talk to them, they're not on the same realm. And I remember another boy I met, his name was Vikram, he was 9, he never used to wash, his clothes were filthy. We bought him a new set of clothes, he still didn't wear them. Partly it's because people feel more sorry for the ones that look really dirty and give more money to them. So he didn't wear the new shirt. But I was just looking at him and I was thinking, we were going to Varanasi the next day, and I was looking at him and I was thinking, God, he looks like he's from another planet. And he looked at me and he said in perfect English, I want to go to Varanasi with you. And I was like, he's not from another planet, he's from this planet. And of course he wants to go to Varanasi with us. And it just breaks your heart. He's no shoes, and he's filthy, and he's living in this rat race. And you just really see karma, when it's heavy enough, is very, very oppressive. And that boy, actually he was sponsored to go to school by one kind person, but he doesn't go to school and he lies to people. This is Vikram, not Gautam, the 14-year-old boy. The 14-year-old boy seemed to have some kind of inner integrity, some sense for what was virtuous and what wasn't, what was right, what wasn't. Vikram was much more of the ilk of he was going to take what he could get, however he could get it. And the thing is, when you see that, you understand it. You understand why this kid would use his intelligence to just get what he could, having such a harsh life. But you also know it's a disaster karmically. He never shares, he never gives, he just asks and he lies to get what he can. So with that paradigm, things can only get worse. So your heart breaks for these kids. We took him for breakfast and for lunch a few times, but bought him a new shirt. But basically, he wasn't doing anything to help himself, and that's perfectly understandable, because being born in that situation, you know, where everyone is just grabbing what they can get, it's understandable, but it's a disaster. I'm very concerned for his future. This other boy, actually his name was Arun, but he changed his name to Gautama because he felt it was lucky. So Gautama is the one who put his father through detox and who takes care of his parents. He had a certain uprightness, a certain integrity. I mean, just like looking at this kid and you're thinking, where did he get it from? Because he didn't get it from Bihar in the year 2013. So it's just another kind of a contemplation. It's like, well, he must have come in with that. And just as Vikram, the lying, cheating kid, came in with something else. But he had made obstructive karma, and there's another thing I saw, which I'm just going to share with you too, because it illustrates an interesting point about karma. The morning that the other monk, my monk friend and I and my attendant had decided that we were going to give him some money to help his family, we told him to meet us at the Om Tibet Cafe for brekkie, and we were walking there, and as we were walking there, he just sold a CD to someone, and an Indian man had come over and said, "Don't buy those CDs, they're very poor quality, they're not worth it." And Gautam had raised his hand in anger, and that Indian man had put his hand around this little boy's neck and squeezed it very hard, so much so that when Gautam pulled back, he had very deep scratch marks in his neck, and his eyes were just full of tears. So I walked past at that moment, and he was calling a friend, and he was saying to his friend, "I want you to come over and kill this guy." So this was at the age of 14. And I was able to explain to him that if he did that, everything would get worse, and explain to him a little bit about karma. But what was fascinating in that exchange is, just think about it, it's right when a few kind-hearted people have made the decision to try to help him that this very painful experience occurs, where something comes and oppresses him. That has to be karmic. And you see this again in India. I've given tiger balm. The Indians there's a brand of balm in Thailand called monkey holding peach, and it's got a picture of a monkey on it. Now the Indian beggars like this because for them it's like a gift from Hanuman. So they love to see the monkey. So I usually get a good supply of monkey holding peach balm and take it to India. And actually many of the beggars around the holy sites in India know about Thai monks' kindness because they see you and they say, "Balm, balm, 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 balm." So occasionally I respond by giving some balm. And but anyway, I remember giving some of this balm to a little boy. He must have been 4. The moment I gave it to him, another boy came and tackled him and punched him and stole his balm from him. And it's like, you just see, my intention is to relieve his suffering and give him happiness for a second. The moment he gets it, more suffering. So you see this, and the dogs don't have an owner. The dogs just wander around, and they like Westerners because they've worked out that we like dogs. So they tend to come towards us, and all the Westerners are patting them, which is ridiculous because they're full of parasites. But anyway, we can't help it. We see a dog and we pat it, and they know that. So anyway, this dog came, and I was patting this dog, and as soon as I patted this dog, another dog right next to it, very jealous, bites its neck. It's just kind of like, it's like it couldn't have happiness for a second. So these are just reflections about karma. If we make enough bad karma, life gets really, really difficult. And even when people try to help us, more of our bad karma ripens and we suffer more. But if we do have enough good karma, enough supportive karma, when we meet with difficulty, people help us and people point us along our path. I'm just trying to relay a bunch of stories, and hopefully the theme is, let's get serious about recognizing our opportunities to make good karma, and let's make lots of good karma. And the other thing, of course, is let's be really careful not to make bad karma, understanding that we all have enough obstructions. We've already made mistakes in our past lives affected by ignorance and delusion. So don't make any more mistakes. We have to utilize the opportunities we can to make as much good karma as we can, to get as much help as we can along this path of dana, sila, samadhi, panya, mental cultivation. And I guess I should make one more one more point I'd like to make. When we work with karma, we're aiming to go beyond karma. So the Buddha and the Arahants have attained something which is beyond karma. In Thai they use the phrase beyond the world, above the world, north of the world. But we have to work with karma. The Eightfold Path is a karmic path. You work with wholesome karma, skillful karma, to attain to that which is beyond karma. But even when people have attained it, this is really valuable to contemplate. Think of Mahamoggallana. Mahamoggallana was actually beaten to death. Now this is a very rich and wonderful example because Mahamoggallana was equal to the Buddha in psychic powers. He was enormously powerful. He could multiply his bodies, he could recollect his past lives, he could fly to heavens, he could visit the hells. He was a superhero in terms of his psychic power, equal to the Buddha. But when these people came and beat him up and his body died, at first he used his psychic powers to put his body back together, and then they came and beat him up again. And he reviewed his past lives and he saw that in one life, a long, long time ago, he'd killed both his parents. And so this karma was so heavy that even as an arahant and even as a foremost disciple of the Buddha, he couldn't escape that karma. So this points to a very important principle. One, law of karma, the power of karma is even more powerful than psychic powers. So we're working with a very, very powerful force which can be very oppressive, very obstructive, so we have to be very careful. Mahamoggallana wasn't experiencing any suffering, which is wonderful, because his mind was beyond conditions. He wasn't grasping at them, he wasn't perceiving them as a self. But even with all his power, he couldn't avoid the power of karma, the law of karma. It's all powerful. So for those of us who are not yet beyond karma, not yet above the world, beyond the world, north of the world, we have to work with karma. And the best thing to aspire for when you make your good karma, please don't wish, may I be rich, may I be rich. Because people used to come and say that at Ajahn Chah's monastery, and he would say, all they're wishing for is, may I suffer, may I suffer, may I suffer. Because rich people have suffering. I know a few of them, and they suffer, just like we do. And what we need to aspire to is, through this act of generosity, may I meet with opportunities to practice, may I meet with teachings, may I meet with good teachers, may I meet with opportunities to practice. And then also I'd add something else. When I meet with those opportunities, may I practice. So you set the intention to have the opportunity to practice, and you set the intention to practice, because that's the best that you can get within the karmic realm, within the realm of conditions, is conditions which support you to practice so that you can realize the unconditioned. I hope that something I said was interesting or helpful. So.
Let us take a moment for a short intermission and immerse ourselves in the enchanting melodies of the song, moments of our life, beautifully explored.
In the warm afternoon of our life, when the road is long and steep, let us recollect the Master's triumph, comforting us without need. In the cool, quiet evening of our life, when life's long battle is done, under let us lie, searching light that brings demand. In the slow closing night of our life, and there's things we shall not fear, keeping close to Buddha's light, till Nibbana we breathe on you.
Please now join us for our upcoming insightful talk with Venerable Bhikkhuni Aya Santusika of the United States. Her insights are remarkably rational, requiring your outer focus to unravel the profound depths of her Dharma discourses. Don't miss out as Venerable Bhikkhuni sheds light on the popular topic, the middle way. Now, please welcome Venerable Bhikkhuni Santusika to talk on this valuable topic. And it is the second part of the lengthy sermon.
Wisdom. So when we're dividing our experience and our thoughts up into the wholesome and the unwholesome, understanding which is which, that's one of the ways the Buddha defined wisdom. To have the wisdom to know. And then also, of course, right intention. So that that's also wisdom. So right view, right intention. And now I'm going to talk about sila, which is the Pali word for virtue. And there are three parts of the Noble Eightfold Path that are devoted to sila. It's extremely important. I was told that in the earlier days of Buddhism in America, people didn't want to pay much attention to this part. They wanted to just do meditation. And as one monk said, it's like loading up your boat and getting ready to row, and it's still tied to the dock. Because without the moral virtue, we can't really get very far. And that's because it's not just about what we do to other living beings, which is, of course, where morality is happening, and also that's where we make karma. It's with other beings. It's also what it does to the mind. That's the karma. It makes an impression on the mind, or the mental stream, or the karmic stream, or the energy consciousness stream, however you want to think about it. So the three aspects of sila that the Buddha included in the Noble Eightfold Path are right speech, right action, and right livelihood. So right speech has 4 parts, as I mentioned this morning. It's to tell the truth. When we understand the impact on our mind of not telling the truth, we would never want to fudge on that again. And it also has an impact on the way we're received in the world, because then people can trust us. It's really great living in a community of people who all have that vow, because you know they're never going to lie to you. It's really powerful, supportive. So telling the truth, of course, includes being careful about not exaggerating. I think that, a person can generally tell the truth, but they might stretch things a little. So it's good to look at that. And the practice that I used to clean that up for myself was that whenever I was talking and what I was saying didn't really match what had happened or what I was really thinking or feeling, then I would just stop and I would say, no, wait a minute, that's not quite right. And I would go back and I would say it more clearly, correctly, more truthfully. And that was a really, really useful practice. So it's like making the mind go back and do it right. And it reminded me of watching a steeplechase. I don't know if you've ever watched this kind of horse race, but it's like the horses run individually through a course that goes over hedges and water jumps and all kinds of things, and they're timed, and the rider goes through this course with the horse as fast as they can, of course, to win the race. But if the horse doesn't take the jump and they just stop, veer away or whatever, you would think that the rider would just walk off the field, just ride off the field, but he doesn't. He takes the horse around and they do the jump and complete the course. And I realized how important that was for training. And so I do that for myself. If it's like, instead of just saying something that isn't quite true, and letting it go, to come back around and say it correctly really helps to make the mind more clear, and it imprints that honesty and that desire for honesty on the mind, and it feels good. So there can be these various situations where people are tempted to lie, especially if something's embarrassing or they feel like they might hurt someone else. But it never pays off, really. Sometimes we have to be more creative with our silence, perhaps. And with our sincerity of how we actually feel about a situation. But I would encourage as much introspection and deliberate attention to this factor as possible, so that you never have to feel like you're being shady, and no one ever has to feel like they can't trust you. And then there's the aspect of right speech that's around harshness. There's 4 parts. Harshness or roughness of speech is one of them. Divisive or malicious speech is different. So those 2. So not saying things that will divide people. Instead, saying things that unite people, that bring peace to situations. And instead of saying things in harsh ways, to be as kind as we can, as gentle as we can. And having said that, sometimes the Buddha would say things that seemed quite harsh. You foolish person, how could you do that? But as far as I can tell, those were always his students, the people who had committed to training. And so, it's like, it's important, it is important to let people know, if you're responsible for that, let them know when they're doing things that are hurting them and wrong. The Buddha said that there are 5 parts to, sometimes he talks about 3 parts or 4 parts, but the 5-part version I think is the most complete. So when you speak, make sure that what you say is true, and say it from a heart of loving kindness, not from a heart of inner hatred. So if we're having a problem with someone, it takes some work sometimes to get to that place where it comes from kindness and not from malice or hatred or wanting to hurt them or just push back. And say it gently rather than harshly. And make sure that what you're saying has a purpose, has a good purpose behind it. Because he said, even if it's something that you know is true, even if it comes from a heart of loving kindness, if it's not going to serve a good purpose, don't say it. And then the 5th thing is say it at the right time. So we may have to say something that's true, has a good purpose. We say kindly and with a heart of loving kindness, but the person won't want to hear it. And you have to say it at a time when they're most likely to be able to hear it. And then the Buddha said, if they don't want to hear it, if they don't like hearing it, then that's okay. There's not, you can't, sometimes you have to say things. It's not about whether or not people like what you say or approve of what you say. It's about whether or not someone who's wise would approve of what we say. And this is really interesting. It's like we worry so much about what other people think, or at least a lot of us do. And most of those people aren't very wise, the ones we're looking for approval from. So it's like thinking about the people who really are in touch with the way things actually are and are wise and care about what they think. And then the 4th of the right speech components, I hope this isn't getting too complicated, but 5 aspects of a particular thing we're going to say, but the noble factor of right speech has these 4 aspects: being true, being not harsh, being not divisive, and not trivial. So it comes back to that, like having a good purpose. Not trivial isn't quite the right word. Gossipy or frivolous, or it's the kind of speech that just wastes people's time or pulls their mind off of what's important onto, junk. There's a lot of this in social media, for example. And the Buddha didn't include in this cordial and amiable talk, he would say. Like you greet someone, you ask them how they are, there's some amount of bonding through talking about things, but that's not the same as like talking about stuff that just kind of like revs up the mind or distracts it or pulls it away, adds more noise. Gossiping about people is, hugely entertaining for people sometimes, but it's detrimental to the mind and it's detrimental to relationships. So it really kind of baffled me that, and the bhikkhuni, the sister I live with, she's like why is frivolous speech in the top 10? Like, there's killing and then there's frivolous speech. I mean, so what I can say about it is that I think it's because there's so much importance. The Buddha placed so much importance on the mind and what we're doing with the mind, and that we want to purify it. So the last thing we kind of want is to dump a bunch of junk into it. It's like kind of dumping junk into your drinking water. It's just not really a good idea. So that's right speech. And as I mentioned, sometimes the best option is silence. And actually, as we think about silence, it's good to get a sense of how we feel about being silent and how it feels to be in a silent environment or to be silent with someone else. And just notice how the mind does with that. If it's okay, and if it's not okay to have silence, then why? What's going on? It's worth reflecting. So right action, very clearly defined around the first 3 precepts. Not killing, not stealing, and not engaging in sexual misconduct. So intentional killing of living beings is pretty straightforward. And if you've ever run into the restatement of the precepts in the positive, I don't know if you have, where they say instead of avoiding killing that you treat all beings with loving kindness, or what other ways do they do the positive? Like cherish life. Thank you. Well, there's nothing wrong with cherishing life, that's for sure. However, in terms of a precept, how do you know if you're succeeding or not? And that's the trouble with turning it into the positive. How much cherishing of life does one need to do? Whereas if you're intentionally killing any living being, you know that. It's clear. You get to the end of your day and you know if you've intentionally killed something or not. This is true with lying too. The Buddha said that a lie is something you know you're gonna lie and you lie. It's like, yes, if you make a mistake, we need to clean that up too, but it's like there's a lot around intention and the clarity of the mind. If we're doing things that we're unclear about, that's also a problem. but to think in terms of really wanting to avoid killing, and that's your intention, and there's no intention to kill. Now, when I start talking about intention, then you might think the automatic swatting of the mosquito is not intentional, but actually it is. You do have a choice there. It's just that we get into habits that cause us to lose track of the fact that we have will involved. And we need to slow that down and see where the choice point is. As one teacher I heard say that, you think that when we get angry, that the anger flares up and we just automatically blast or do whatever it is. And it's like, it's not true. There is choice in there. There is a moment when you decide to go with it. And that we need to recognize that. That's within our control. It may take work and time to unpack the habit pattern and change it, but we can, and that's part of our responsibility. So, with right action, not killing and not stealing, not taking anything that isn't offered to us, it's definitely a cut above stealing, because it's like to know this is meant for me. The tea was offered. I don't mean you have to be like a monk or a nun and make sure somebody puts it all in your hands, but we know whether it's meant for us or not. I had one person who was coming to our place who was started keeping the precepts, and she was a person who waters plants at company offices. And she said there was one office where they said to her, now whenever you come, help yourself to a drink in the refrigerator. And she wouldn't always just do that automatically. They'd say, go get your drink, and you knew that was offered. She knew. And there'd be other places, there's a bowl of candy there on the counter, and she's like, no, that's for the clients, not for the plant watering lady, unless they say, right? And so it's you think, oh, that's a small thing. But the mind gets so clear, and so it's like so pure that we just don't have to regret anything. There's a quality there that actually brings more than we think it would, to have that kind of clarity and purity in our life. And then sexual misconduct. I don't know why it so often seems so muddy. Maybe because in the suttas, in the scriptures, it's totally male-oriented. It's just speaking to men about their sexual misconduct. And it's very cultural. So it doesn't even say that a man shouldn't have sex outside his primary relationship, because there was a lot of, having more than one wife and all of that. Although the Buddha did talk about that in other places, that to have a good marriage, you need to be faithful to each other. So the way I feel about sexual misconduct, since I had a lot of lay life before becoming a nun, I feel like I have some experience in this. It's really about not using sexuality in any way that would be harmful to yourself or to someone else. And that certainly includes being involved with someone who's got a partner, or being involved outside your own relationship if you're committed to someone. That causes a lot of pain. And when I was unmarried and once in a while would run into someone who wanted to get involved and said, my wife is completely fine with this. I said, let's call her. Are you kidding me? Anyway, you get the point. It's not worth it. It's not worth it. And I've had a couple of different people over the years come to me and talk to me about feeling like they want to get involved with someone who's married and not sure what they should do. And I'm like, I'm sure what you should do. Do not do it. No. And they'll come back to me years later and go, I'm so glad you were so clear. You saved me from a lot of trouble. Sexual desire is so strong and so tricky and so sticky. Human beings will risk their lives, even when their life is on the line, to have sex with someone they're not supposed to have sex with. What are we thinking? I know what we're thinking. But it's like really examining desire, really looking at what lies behind it, really looking at what we really want in our life, what we really want our minds to be like, what we really want our relationships to be like. Because if you want to be happy and free, to walk this path to full liberation, that kind of stuff is going to have to stop. And all the rest of it, anything that falls into the dingy category, we have to set aside. And following sensual desire becomes less and less and less appealing, less and less interesting, and we see the danger in it much, much more clearly as we develop the mind and really experience the unworldly pleasure of spiritual development, awakening. It's so much better than anything sensual. Now, having said that, we've also all done things. And I can say this from experience, and I can say it from one of my teachers in Thailand. He said, we've all done things. But he said, when you look at the past, just cut it off. He did this just cut it off. Don't worry about what you did before. What matters is what we do now and forward. And we learn from the things from the past. Acknowledge it, forgive ourselves, everyone else, and move forward with a whole new agenda. One that's about purifying the mind and being really safe. Ourselves, we're safe, and every living being in the world is safe around us. This is an incredible gift. And this is what the Buddha said. And when we keep moral virtue, we are giving this incredible gift to every living being, a gift of safety. No one ever has to worry about their stuff around you. No one ever has to worry about their partner or their child around you. No one ever has to worry about themselves around you. You're safe. What a great thing. And even if we don't know how it works, because we're that way, we are also safe. And I don't mean that nothing ever happens. No one's ever violent with someone who's living in such a way, but there's a part of you that no violence could ever touch, that purity of your mind. So an innocent person gets killed. That's not such a big deal. I'm sorry, it sounds insensitive, but that's not how I mean it. I'm not worried about the innocent person. I'm worried about the one who's not. It's really bad for the person who's doing the killing, but it's not so bad for the person who dies, because they're going on in a good way. We always want to preserve life. It's not taking it lightly. But where do we go from here? Everyone's going to die. We're all going to die. And we're going, it's not the end, in case you haven't kind of felt that yet. It's not the end. And what we do with our morality sets our course beyond this life. And we have choices about that right now, which direction we're going. And so it's in every small choice that we purify the mind, that we set our course, our direction for what's wholesome and peaceful, and it changes our character. Our character develops. So you can look back over the years after making this kind of decision and really feel good. Or you can look back over the hours after making this kind of decision and feel really good. Every day when you get ready to go to sleep at night, you can reflect, I didn't intentionally kill any living beings today. I didn't intentionally take anything that wasn't meant for me. I didn't impose on anyone with my sexual energy, and that's good. I can be happy about that. Everyone that I encountered all day long was safe around me. What a great thing. And then your boat can pull away from the dock. Your boat of mindfulness and samadhi, concentration. It's got a chance. And your wisdom develops more as you're utilizing it, refining it. Your virtue gets clearer and clearer, and the mind is happy, more stable, less drama, and less trauma. So I think what's wonderful about it is that we have this agency, our own ability to choose. And even if you feel like I said before, if there's some really strong pattern, that can also be changed. It needs to be made conscious. And then, step by step, it changes. I guess the first thing is to really recognize that there's no benefit whatsoever in any kind of cheating, in any kind of behavior outside of these beautiful precepts. We're missing so much if we don't follow this, and we're not going to miss anything if we do. That's comes from the voice of experience of not just me, but the Buddha also.
all for today. If you have any questions or concerns, please contact us at info@buddhadharmatv.com. We work hard to share the noble, peaceful, and sublime teachings of the Buddha with you, and helping you persuade the spiritual path under his wisdom. Please encourage and support those interested in the rational and enlightened teachings of the Buddha. We believe our programs on Buddha Dharma TV will inspire peace lovers around the globe. Good night. Namo Buddhaya.